Alesana's mountain of success has more than one peak, and this album is absolutely evidence of that. Welcome to Ray Runner Does Music, where today we're taking a look at Alesana's next installment in their discography called Where the Sun is Silent. This is part of an ongoing request series requested by my friend Ashley Perrin, where we're taking a look at the entire Alesana discography. And whether it was the initial album's head-on approach to the genre, or these albums as moments of storytelling that took me out of the music and dragged me into a story for a completely different mindscape, the band so far has provided so many different ideas, moments in my head where I had to stop, think, and analyze. Why is my phone going off? Hello? I swear. But it seems as though Alesana can never stop surprising me, and this is another album where they do exactly that. I was really surprised to see that the Annabelle story continues on from the emptiness. I originally thought that it was a series of 3 or 4, I keep forgetting how many albums are strict concepts, 3 or 4 albums that were plainly different ideas and different stories being told, and while every album takes inspiration from a different source, such as The Emptiness focusing on Edgar Allan Poe and this album focusing on Dante's Inferno from the Divine Comedy, I didn't realize that there was a concurrent story that everything was based upon, that everything was going through. So that's a very interesting topic to explore here. Now, touching on this album's inspiration, I should say, Dante's Inferno is a part of the Divine Comedy that does focus on a journey through hell, and I can see a lot of the music here and the lyrical aspects, of course, as well, that are very comparable to a journey through hell, or just a journey in general. There are a lot more moments of spoken word and direct confrontation with the subject matter, such as moments like, I have to read off my script here, "Oh, the violence, the ocean beckons with its gaze, excuse me." Everything feels much more confrontational to the topic directly at hand, rather than sort of dancing around it, providing hints at the story. It's much more of a focus on storytelling, which doesn't detract from the music either, which is a very good element to have when you're doing a concept album. Because a lot of bands will either focus strictly on the music and they'll just say, oh yeah, this one line connects to this one line from the introduction connects to one line in the outro, and that's the whole story right there. Every song here feels like it has a part of the story to tell, even if it's very little. Some songs are massive in proportion to how much they add on to the story for very obvious reasons, like, again, the spoken words, or it's just really dependent on what's the phrase I'm looking for here, how it's all contributes. Sean messes around with a lot more thematic elements and thematic singing, like in Circle 7, Sins of the Lion, especially in the moment of the pre-chorus. I've already noticed that, as I'm saying this right now, this is completely just off the top of my head, there are a lot of moments in Alesana's discography where the pre-choruses really lead into things. It builds on this constant tension that they have an absolute talent for communicating, and I feel like the pre-choruses are really where they set things up and they keep things going, and how they manage to keep my attention throughout everything as their albums go on here. So yeah, the pre-choruses, like even moments in The Thespian, to call back to a different album, they do manage to keep that going very much so. Even with the album Where Myth Fades to Legend, which, if I'm planning my uploads correctly, it's going up before this one, so you already know my feelings on that. It made everyone, even the rough vocalist Dennis Lee, with how raucous and loud he was, seem very faded out, but there were pre-choruses, especially from Sean, that still managed to almost steal the show from an otherwise bland experience. Speaking of Dennis Lee, this may just be me, but this album is just sort of in the middle for him performance-wise. It feels like sometimes he's being drowned out by the guitars, and other times he's just sort of going through the motions. It's not bad, or even as average as, again, the previous album Where Myth Fades to Legend, but it is something worth noting that he's always been able to come across as one of the strongest parts, especially here in this album, Where the Sun is Silent, one of the best part of a song, but perhaps it's because this album is more focused on being cinematic, so wiping guitars and swooping vocals are more of the focus rather than trying to just hit you in the face with this feeling of violence and everything, even though violence is a very common factor and elements when it comes to their discography. Also, call me insane, but a lot of moments in this album feel like, you know, Andy Leo from Crown the Empire? If I wasn't afraid of copyright, I'd shove a clip in here of one of his songs. Sean kinda sounds like Andy a lot of times throughout this album. Like, in other albums I can very clearly distinguish, obviously that's not him, but I can't help but make the comparison here more than once. There's a lot of examples to pick out from. And I think an element that may bridge on negative for some people, but not so much for me, is that it feels almost like a Sean and Dennis duo project as opposed to a full Alesana album. It's not as bad as 30 Seconds to Mars America, which is an album that, trust me, I will get to. I'll focus on later on the channel. I have some words for that album, where it doesn't just feel like one person, or in this case two people, strictly, literally and metaphorically making all the music that centers around them. It just feels like these two are the only people who really pop out. I wasn't exactly able to pick out many moments of either drum fills or guitar solos that made me stop and think, hey, that's a notable moment. It was something that felt weird for me because I always like to pick out those individual moments, but there was no real situation where I could do that. Dennis is keeping constant consistency. Sean is delivering power vocals from track to track. This album, I'm very happy to see where it went and to give these two vocalists a general center stage here, because you don't see a lot of albums nowadays where the vocalist gets to take center stage, because everybody's like, oh, just because he's the lead singer doesn't mean he has to be at the center of things. Having your singers at the center of things is not a bad thing at all. Just look at moments such as, look at a band like Hollywood Undead. I know it's a very weird example and weird comparison to draw Alesana to Hollywood Undead, but they are from the same sort of time when it comes to music and popularity, I suppose. Alesana's a little earlier, but when it comes to Hollywood Undead, you focus more on the singers in the tracks, whether it be for personality or lyrical proportions, as compared to the actual instrumentation. Even on newer albums like 5 or Day of the Dead, you're always focusing on the singers, because that's an example of where the lead singers can take control over a track. I have to actually go and find instrumentals of some songs, unless it's a very blatantly rough song or a blatantly slow song such as Tendencies or Outside, because you have to actually find songs that showcase good moments of instrumentation, and it's not like they're bare at all. So, like with this album, Where the Sun is Silence, this is just very much an album where the vocalists do have the opportunity to take center stage and really make their own mark in their own individual time to produce something beautiful for this album. This album was very enjoyable, and when it came to listening to this album, I actually listened to the Annabelle trilogy first, going back, so this was sort of the thing, with it being the second album. Usually by the second album, when I'm doing a bunch of reviews for a single band, I start thinking to myself, okay, this is becoming a drag. But this album very much made me want to continue doing it and all that, so I gotta hand it to Alesana for being able to keep my attention for that. With the last two releases, I touched on feeling a little rushed, such as with On Frail Wings of Vanity and Wax, but again, this album did anything but drain me. So, with all that said, Where the Sun is Silent by Alesana, I almost said Asking Alexandria, is getting an 8 out of 10, and that's the end of the review. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with what I said? Do you disagree with what I said? What do you think of Alesana as a band in totality? I haven't really touched on that in the outro quite yet for this series, so that's a discussion topic for the comments. Don't forget to like, dislike, subscribe, unsubscribe, share, Instagram it, retweet it, and tout it. Don't forget to stay safe, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.